They say you always know when your marriage is crumbling, like the faint scent of smoke before the fire consumes everything. But I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I just refused to look at the smoke curling in the corners of my home. My name is Cassandra Holt, I'm 44 years old, and this is the story of how my sister destroyed my marriage, and blamed me for it. It started 2 years ago, on a rainy Friday afternoon, when my younger sister Eliza showed up on my porch with 2 suitcases and mascara streaking down her cheeks. "He hit me, Cass," she whispered, her lip trembling. "I left for good this time. I didn't even ask questions. I hugged her like I used to when she was little and scared of thunder. I brought her in, gave her tea, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. My husband, Michael, was kind, at first. She's family," he said, rubbing my back as Eliza sat curled on the sofa, flipping through her phone. "You did the right thing." He even joked that the house felt livelier with her around. I laughed. God, I laughed like a fool. Eliza was always the charming one. Blonde hair that curled just so. A laugh that made men pause. She'd float through the house in oversized t-shirts that just happened to ride up her thighs. I saw it. Of course I saw it. But I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was paranoid. What kind of woman suspects her own sister? But then came the little things. Michael suddenly started working late. Eliza borrowed my perfume. Twice I found their phones charging side by side, his screen lit up with a text, and Eliza, sitting too close. Still, I said nothing. Because silence, I thought, was grace. Then one morning, I overheard them. It was just one sentence. Just one. But it changed everything. "You need to tell her," Eliza hissed in the kitchen. "I'm not hiding forever." And Michael's voice, just a little longer. "She's fragile." Fragile. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, gripping the banister like it could hold together the pieces of my breaking mind. I didn't confront them. Not then. I went back to bed. Pretended I had a headache. And in the silence of that room, I stared at the ceiling and made a plan. You see, the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was that when it all came out, because it always does, Eliza turned to me and said with no shame, "If you hadn't been so cold to him for so long, maybe he wouldn't have come to me." She said that. My sister. The one I fed, clothed, and sheltered. She blamed me. I didn't scream. I didn't throw plates or cry in the shower. No. I smiled. Because if they thought their little game would break me, they didn't know me at all. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who should have protected you, you're not alone. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel if this story speaks to your heart. And tell me in the comments. Where are you from, and has someone you trusted ever blamed you for their own betrayal? Your voice matters here. I let them play house under my roof. I let my husband walk into the bedroom we used to share smelling like her cheap vanilla lotion. I let my sister wear my robes, cook in my kitchen, toss her head back and laugh like nothing had shattered. Because I wanted to see how far they'd go. I wanted to watch them hang themselves with the rope I quietly handed over, inch by inch. Eliza acted like she was doing me a favor by staying. "You look tired, Cass. I'll take care of dinner tonight." And Michael? He stopped even pretending to look guilty. He'd say things like, "Eliza has a real gift with spices," or "You could learn a thing or two from her." As if he wasn't praising the woman I used to braid hair for. As if he wasn't mocking the marriage we built over 18 years. People often think betrayal comes in one swift blow, a text, a kiss, a fight. But no. True betrayal is slow. It's a smile that lingers too long. A skipped dinner. A birthday forgotten. It's coming home to find them whispering in the hallway, falling silent when they see you. And the worst part is when they stop hiding it, when they know you know, and they don't even care. I started documenting everything. Dates. Times. Photos. I saved security footage. I installed a second camera in the hallway, hidden inside the vent cover. You'd be amazed at what people say when they think no one's watching. And I watched. One night, I heard Eliza whisper in the hallway, "She's not even crying. It's like she doesn't care." Michael chuckled, and it was the ugliest sound I'd ever heard. She probably already knows. She's just too spineless to say anything. Spineless. I clenched my jaw and smiled at the screen. Let them think I was weak. Let them believe I was broken. I wasn't broken, I was boiling. At work, I remained composed. I smiled at patients, handed out charts, joked with Dr. Patel like nothing was wrong. But in my heart, I was building a fortress. Every betrayal, every lie, was a brick. And soon, I'd be standing on a tower so high they'd never see the fall coming. One afternoon, while they were out together, Eliza claimed she was taking Michael shopping for new ties. I dug through her closet. I wasn't looking for proof. I already had plenty. I was looking for something else. A weakness. A chink in her self-righteous armor. And I found it. A small notebook, tucked into the bottom of her suitcase, under her old ballet flats. It wasn't locked. Eliza was careless. Or maybe she just never thought I'd go looking. Inside were scribbles of poetry, song lyrics, and journal entries. She had written about Michael, his scent, his hands, the way he looked at her like she was the sun. But what made me stop was one sentence she had scrawled over and over again on the last page: "She doesn't deserve him. She doesn't even see him anymore." It was always about me. Not love. Not passion. Just envy. Eliza had wanted what I had since we were girls. My dolls, my room, my friends. And now, my husband. I sat on the edge of her bed and realized something cold and hard: she didn't just want Michael, she wanted to be me. To wear my life like a costume and laugh as she tore it apart. But I wasn't going to let her. That night, I cooked dinner. I lit candles. I poured wine. I wore the red dress Michael once said made me look too intimidating. And when they walked in, I greeted them like nothing was wrong. "Join me," I said, smiling sweetly. "I made your favorite." Michael hesitated. Eliza stared. I was the perfect wife. Until now, they thought I was either stupid or numb. But this new version of me? It made them nervous. Good. Let the performance begin. That night over dinner, I watched them squirm behind their forced smiles. Michael fidgeted with his wine glass. Eliza complimented the pasta 3 times too many. It was the most satisfying meal I'd ever served, not because of the food, but because of the tension I could feel crackling across the table like static. They didn't know what I knew. But they knew something had changed. "Do you think we could invite your parents next weekend?" I asked Michael, topping off his glass with a generous pour of red. "I miss having family around the table." He blinked, confused. Sure, yeah." Eliza coughed into her napkin. I caught the flash of panic in her eyes. "Perfect." I started small. Little acts of kindness. Generosity. Warmth. I brought Eliza fresh towels in the morning. Bought Michael new dress socks. I laughed at their jokes. I made my presence gentle and persistent, like a ghost haunting a house, reminding them it's still mine. I wanted them uncomfortable in their sin, to feel it itch beneath their skin like a rash. I wanted them to think, "Why isn't she mad?" Because rage is easy to dismiss. But calm? Calm terrifies the guilty. At work, I became sharper. More focused. I started taking on weekend shifts. Not for the money, but to build time away. Distance is power when they don't know what you're doing with it. And here's what I was doing. 1. I opened a secret bank account. 2. I contacted a discreet private investigator. 3. I created a new email, one Eliza and Michael didn't know about. 4. I reconnected with an old friend, Vanessa, who worked at a law firm and owed me a favor from years ago. One afternoon while Michael was working late and Eliza was taking a suspiciously long bath, I met Vanessa at a cafe. I handed her a USB drive full of videos, screenshots, and audio clips. "Cass," she said after browsing a few files, her brows raised. "This is damning." "I know. Are you planning to file for divorce?" "Not yet." She looked up from her laptop. "Then what are you planning?" I smiled. "I want to break their hearts first." Vanessa nodded slowly. "You've always been quiet, Cass. But damn, I never thought you were dangerous." "I'm not," I said, sipping my tea. "I'm just done being the fool." Back home, I started turning their love story into their downfall. I printed photos, candid stills from the vent camera. I left one in Michael's coat pocket. Another in Eliza's makeup drawer. Just one image. One scene. Not enough to start a war, but enough to plant doubt. To make them wonder, who knows? To make them fear I knew. They didn't mention it. But their behavior shifted. Michael became more cautious, he kissed me goodnight again. Held my hand while watching TV. Eliza started sleeping with her door closed and locked. They were unraveling. I watched it all, quiet as a shadow. Then came the perfect opportunity. A charity gala. Michael had been honored by the hospital board for his years of service. We'd been invited as a couple, and, of course, Eliza insisted on coming along. "You'll need help picking a dress," she chirped. "It's been ages since you wore something formal." "True," I said, smiling sweetly. "Maybe you can help me find something that doesn't intimidate Michael." She froze. Just a half second too long. Then laughed nervously. I let it go. We spent the next week shopping, planning, pretending. Eliza suggested lipstick shades while sneaking glances at her phone. I knew she was texting him. I watched her reflection in the boutique mirror, biting her lip while typing furiously. "Red suits you," she finally said, holding up a silk gown. I took it. "I think I'll wear black." At the gala, I made sure to arrive with Michael, looking polished, elegant, and utterly in control. Eliza followed behind, slightly overdressed, clearly flustered. I stayed close to Michael all evening, whispered praises into the right ears, and ensured the photographers captured exactly what I wanted, the image of a loyal wife and a respected man. But later that night, as they slept, I uploaded something very different. A private link. Password protected. Sent to one specific recipient, Michael's boss at the hospital. The video? A hallway kiss. Eliza in her robe. Michael in his boxers. Timestamped. Labeled. The seed had been planted. Now I just had to wait for it to bloom. 3 days after the gala, Michael came home with a pale face and a stiff jaw. He kissed me on the cheek like he always did, but there was a tremble in it, like a man whose world had shifted slightly off balance. I said nothing, but inside I smiled. The email had been opened. The video had been watched. And Michael, who prided himself on his clean reputation, now had a stain he couldn't scrub away. He didn't say a word at dinner. Just pushed his food around and muttered something about a long day. Eliza picked up on it too, her eyes flicked between us, nerves simmering beneath her perfect lashes. She asked if everything was okay. Michael snapped, "Why wouldn't it be?" Too quickly, too loud. I just kept chewing, slow and steady. My silence was now the loudest voice in the room. That night, after I heard their footsteps retreat to their separate rooms, yes, separate, as if they thought that made it better, I sat in the study and opened the second email. The one I'd scheduled. This one went to Eliza's ex, the man she claimed had hit her and left her broken. The same man she'd cheated on. The same man who had messaged me months ago after hearing she was living with us. Turns out, Eliza had a habit of using sympathy to manipulate everyone around her. The email I sent him was short. Just the video. No message. Let her past catch up to her. Let all the masks fall off one by one. The next morning, Eliza was jumpy. Her phone buzzed twice and she threw it across the couch like it burned. Spam, she muttered. I didn't ask. I simply handed her coffee with extra sugar, the way she liked it, and said, "You look tired." She blinked at me, like she didn't know whether to feel comforted or threatened. Perfect. Michael left early for work. Eliza stayed behind. And when I stepped out to water the plants, I heard her on the phone through the open kitchen window. He knows, she whispered harshly. I think she knows, too. She's being too nice, it's creepy. I turned the hose just slightly to spray the roses. Red petals trembled under the water. Almost like blood. You said this wouldn't be a problem, she continued. You said you'd tell her, I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. She was scared. Michael was unraveling. And I was only just beginning. That afternoon, I called Vanessa and asked her to move forward with the next step. It wasn't legal yet. But it would be. Soon. I just needed one more piece of leverage. So I staged a dinner. A formal, candlelit affair in the dining room. Michael thought it was for the two of us. Eliza thought she was just helping. But in reality, I had invited someone else. His name was Daniel Whitmore. Michael's boss. He arrived 10 minutes late, charming and curious. I greeted him like an old friend. Eliza stared at him with wide, confused eyes. Michael's face turned to stone the moment he stepped through the door. Didn't you say you wanted to thank him for the gala invite? I asked Michael sweetly. Michael stammered. Eliza retreated to the kitchen. Dinner was delicious. I made sure of it. But it wasn't the food that made Michael sweat. It was the conversation. Daniel asked about trust, loyalty, professionalism. He never once mentioned the video, but the undertone was there, heavy and suffocating. And Michael couldn't meet his gaze for more than a second. After dessert, Daniel looked at me with a faint smile and said, "You're a strong woman, Cassandra. Composed. Elegant. I admire that." "Thank you," I replied softly. "I've learned to keep my eyes open." His gaze flicked briefly to Michael, then back to me. Good. When Daniel left, the house was so quiet I could hear Eliza pacing upstairs. Michael didn't say a word. He went into his study and closed the door. And I went to bed. Alone. Victorious. Because the cracks had started to show. And when the foundation collapses, it always starts with a tremor. I was the tremor. And soon, I would be the quake. It was Michael who cracked first. Not with a confession or an apology, no, men like him never admit. They shift blame like cards in a magician's hand. But when I came home from work the next day, I found him hunched over at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. The look on his face wasn't guilt. It was fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing everything. He didn't hear me walk in. His hands were pressed together, knuckles white, jaw clenched. I waited a few seconds before softly saying, "Long day?" He startled, then forced a smile that looked like it was stapled to his face. "Just tired." "I bet." I walked past him, brushing my fingertips over his shoulder the way I used to, before he sold pieces of our life to my sister in secret. "Dinner'll be ready in 30. He flinched at my touch. Good. I went upstairs and found Eliza sitting on my bed. My bed. Legs crossed, phone in hand, face pale. She looked up like a teenager caught in a lie. "Everything all right?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just thinking. Anything I can help with?" That question lingered. I knew what it meant. Do you want to confess? Do you want to get out ahead of what's coming? But she just stood and walked toward me. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how unhappy you both were." The gaslight nearly made me laugh. Eliza, I said, smiling, I think it's best if you find another place to stay. Just until things calm down. Her mouth opened, stunned. You're kicking me out? No, I said gently. I'm giving you the chance to leave with a shred of dignity before what's coming arrives at your feet. She blinked. What are you talking about? I leaned close, my voice a whisper like hers. You should check your email. Then I walked out. Downstairs, Michael stood in the hallway holding his keys, face taut. What did you tell her? Nothing you haven't already told her in whispers when you thought I was asleep. His eyes widened. You've been spying on us? I stepped closer. No, Michael. I've been watching you. There's a difference. Spying is what liars do. Watching is what wives do when they're deciding how to end a war. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Just stood there as I walked past and opened the door. Where are you going? He called. I turned slightly. To breathe. Because this house had become a tomb. And I wasn't going to die in it. I drove straight to Vanessa's office. She had everything ready. The divorce papers, the documentation of Michael's affair, the screenshots of Eliza's journal entries, and the list of financial assets he'd quietly transferred to a separate account in his name, a fact he'd assumed I hadn't found. I handed her the final piece, a copy of the security footage, with timestamps and an affidavit of chain of custody. It would hold up in court. She looked at me and said, Cass, you want to keep the house? I shook my head. No. I want them to stay in it just long enough to destroy each other inside it. Because the truth is, when you feed betrayal to liars, they choke on it. Back home, I found Eliza in tears on the staircase, phone in hand. She looked up at me like a child who'd been scolded too harshly. You sent it to Mom, she said. You sent her everything. I said nothing. You made me look like a homewrecker. I tilted my head. Sweetheart, you are one. She collapsed onto the steps, sobbing. Michael came in from the den, his voice sharp. Why would you drag our whole family into this? I looked between them, the man I once loved and the sister I once protected. Because if I have to suffer betrayal, you're both going to suffer truth. And then I climbed the stairs, feeling lighter with every step. Behind me, I heard Eliza sobbing and Michael shouting, accusing her now, blaming her for the exposure, for the timing, for being too loud, too needy, too obvious. The cracks were no longer cracks. They were fractures. And soon, the house would cave in. By Monday morning, the fire I lit had caught the curtains. Michael's email had been flagged for internal review by his hospital board. Eliza's ex, whom she left in disgrace, posted a cryptic thread online hinting at her affair, tagging mutual friends. And my mother had left me 3 voicemails in tears, none of which I returned. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for appearances. But I didn't need anyone to cry for me anymore. I needed them to watch. By lunchtime, I arrived at the bank for my scheduled appointment. Vanessa had already frozen the accounts Michael secretly opened, and thanks to the marriage being in my name on most legal assets, I held majority claim to the house. Not that I wanted it. I just wanted them locked inside with each other, without my name on the deed, but with my shadow crawling across every wall. Do you want to redirect the final mortgage payment? The banker asked me kindly. No, I smiled. Let him make the last payment. It'll be the only thing he finishes that I won't undo. I moved into a furnished apartment on the edge of town. Temporary. Peaceful. Quiet. It overlooked a lake, the kind of still water that makes you realize how loud your life had been until now. The only photos I brought were the ones from before Eliza moved in, me and Michael on our wedding day, Mom holding my hand at graduation, Eliza as a flower girl. I looked at them, one by one, and put them in a drawer. That night, I sent out the emails. To Michael's employer, I attached a timeline of his affair, complete with evidence of falsified late shifts and inappropriate use of work communication systems. To Eliza's freelance clients, I included a professional note. Please be advised this individual has a history of breaching trust with personal and financial boundaries. Documentation attached. To our family group chat, I said nothing. Just sent a photo, Michael and Eliza, asleep on the living room couch. Her head on his chest. His hand on her thigh. Timestamped. Clear. Undeniable. Then I turned off my phone. By morning, they were both in free fall. Michael was put on unpaid administrative leave pending investigation. Eliza's inbox was full of cancellations, and her Instagram, once filled with inspirational quotes and bikini selfies, was eerily silent. A mutual cousin messaged me, "Is it true? Please tell me it's not true." I didn't reply. Because the truth had never mattered to them when it came from me. It only mattered when the world echoed it back. Later that evening, as I lit a lavender candle in my new living room, a knock came at the door. I expected Vanessa. Or maybe a package. It was Eliza. No makeup. No grace. Her hair matted like she hadn't brushed it in days. Her eyes red, mouth trembling. "Please," she whispered. "Just talk to me." I stepped out and closed the door behind me. "There's nothing left to say." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she cried. "I was lonely. You and Michael, things were broken before I got there." "You weren't." Stop. My voice was so calm, it startled even me. "Don't you dare say this was about me. You planned it. I read your journal. I saw the way you looked at him when you thought I was asleep." Tears welled. "He's not even talking to me now. He said I ruined everything." I leaned forward. "No, Eliza. I ruined everything, for you. You betrayed your sister, destroyed your own reputation, and now the man you threw it all away for is showing you what loyalty means to him." She dropped her gaze. "So you win, then?" I tilted my head. "No. There's no winning here. Just truth. And truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits, and then it burns." She didn't say another word. Just turned and walked down the hallway, her figure growing smaller and smaller until she was gone. I didn't watch until she reached the parking lot. Because she was already dead to me. Back inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked around the apartment. It was quiet. Sparse. But it was mine. No lies. No ghosts. And that was more than either of them had now. 3 days passed before Michael reached out. I'd been waiting, of course. That kind of ego doesn't crumble without one last desperate groan. His text came at 2:14 a.m., a time that always reveals what people really want. "Michael, can we talk? I'm sorry. Please." I didn't respond. By sunrise, he sent another. "Michael, you were right. About everything. I should have told you. I made a mistake." Mistake. They always call it that. Like he misplaced his keys or forgot a birthday. Not like he chose, deliberately, to hand my sister pieces of me and watch her tear them up. That afternoon, I returned from the grocery store to find him waiting in the parking lot of my apartment building, leaning against his car like some tired version of the man I once loved. His collar was wrinkled. His wedding ring, he was still wearing it, glinted in the late sun like it didn't know it had become a lie. "Cass," he said, stepping forward. "Just 5 minutes. That's all I ask." I didn't speak. Just opened the door and let him into the apartment. He looked around like he expected to see pictures of us. There were none. Not anymore. "I know I can't undo it," he started, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I don't even know what to say. But I need you to know that it didn't start the way you think. I wasn't looking for anything. It just happened." I raised my eyebrow. "You tripped and fell into her bed?" He winced. "That's fair." Silence swelled between us. He stood in it, hoping I'd say something softer. I didn't. Finally, he said, I lost everything. My job. My name. My dignity. She's gone. Eliza won't even return my calls. And now I'm just floating. And what do you want from me, Michael? I asked. He hesitated, then sat on the edge of the sofa, head in his hands. I want you to help me fix it. That's when I realized the truth. He hadn't come to apologize. He'd come to use me again. Not as a wife this time, but as a safety net. As the dependable woman who always patched his holes, stitched his messes, and stood by with clean towels while he bled all over our life. He didn't miss me. He missed my stability. I sat across from him, my voice smooth and unflinching. You didn't come here to say sorry. You came to beg for the version of me that used to keep quiet. But she's gone. You buried her the day you let Eliza touch you. His eyes glossed. I know. But I don't know how to start over. That's not my burden anymore. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I want you to listen, and listen carefully, I said. You betrayed your wife. You slept with her sister. You allowed her to blame me. And when I didn't scream, when I didn't cry, you thought I was weak. But I was watching. Documenting. Preparing. He looked like he might cry. I hoped he would. I wanted him to feel it leak out the way he never let me grieve, silently, bitterly, alone. I hope every time you try to restart your life, you remember this moment, I whispered. You came crawling back to the woman you burned, and she didn't spit on you, she simply let you sit in your ashes. Michael stood slowly, his face hollow. He walked to the door, turned back once. Goodbye, Cassandra. I didn't answer. He left. And I exhaled. Because that was his final plea. And instead of granting it, I turned it into a grave. Eliza always did know how to play the victim. From the time we were little girls, she had a way of shifting blame like silk, smooth, effortless, convincing. So when I heard she was trying to rebuild her image, I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was how fast she moved. 2 weeks after Michael's visit, I saw her face in a Facebook post shared by one of our cousins. Eliza stood behind a podium at a local women's networking brunch, all soft colors and honeyed words, smiling like she hadn't burned down an entire life for lust and jealousy. The caption read, "Healing from betrayal, finding strength after toxic relationships." My stomach clenched, not with pain, but with something colder. Sharper. She wasn't just rewriting the story. She was making me the villain. I clicked the link to the event recording. It opened with Eliza clasping her hands over her chest, eyes misty. I moved in with my sister to escape a dangerous relationship. I didn't expect to fall for someone, especially not someone who wasn't mine. But when a woman is neglected long enough, unseen long enough, she reaches for anything that feels like warmth. The audience murmured in sympathetic agreement. She found out, Eliza continued, voice trembling. And instead of a conversation, she ruined my life. She exposed me publicly. Destroyed my career. And now she wants me to disappear. I froze. That woman, that twisted narrator wearing my face, was weaponizing my silence. She was painting herself in victim's gold, hoping no one would notice the blood on her hands. But here's the thing, I didn't ruin her life. She handed me the match, and I simply struck it. The next day, I reached out to a friend of mine, Naomi, who worked as a writer for a popular lifestyle blog. Naomi and I had shared college classes, book clubs, coffee spills. She owed me nothing, but I knew she'd listen. I'm not looking for sympathy, I told her. I just want the truth told. You know, I've never been the type to speak first. But now she's using my silence as proof of guilt. Naomi was quiet for a moment, then asked, "You have proof?" Enough to make her wish she never said a word. She didn't ask for details. She trusted me. 2 days later, an article went live, "The sister, the husband, and the lie, a wife speaks out. It didn't use our real names. But anyone who'd seen Eliza's speech knew. And it didn't come from malice, it came from fact. It told my story in my words. The affair. The manipulation. The years of loyalty shattered in secret. It ended with a line I'd asked Naomi to keep: forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And silence doesn't mean surrender. Within hours, Eliza's post began to unravel. The comments under her video shifted from hearts and hugs to, "Didn't your sister take you in after your breakup? Funny how your version leaves out the part where you seduced your brother-in-law. Saw that article today, yikes." And just like that, the mask slipped. Eliza messaged me that night. One line. "Eliza, how could you?" I didn't respond. The next day, her account went private. She canceled her next speaking engagement. She ghosted her clients. She thought the public eye would be her redemption. Instead, it became her reckoning. I didn't gloat. I didn't post follow-ups. I simply watched, quietly, while her fantasy collapsed under the weight of truth. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. Because when liars try to wear halos, the light always shows their cracks. It's funny, the silence that follows destruction. When everything finally crashes, when the shouting ends, the messages stop, the phone goes quiet, you expect some kind of emptiness. A hollow echo in the places they used to fill. But for me, it wasn't emptiness. It was peace. For the first time in over a year, I could breathe without flinching. I could sip coffee without wondering who had used the same mug the night before. I could fold laundry without feeling like I was smoothing out lies. There were no whispers behind doors, no tense glances across the dinner table, no footsteps sneaking down the stairs at midnight. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I found her again. Me. I started slow. I rearranged the furniture in my apartment, not because it needed it, but because I could. I painted the wall above the bed a warm cream color. I took myself to brunch. I bought a stack of books I'd been meaning to read for years. And when people asked how I was doing, I told them the truth. I'm healing. Not recovering. Not surviving. Healing. I didn't stalk their socials. I didn't check for updates. But they still came. Through whispers at the grocery store. Through sideways glances at church. Through mutual friends who sent texts like, "He moved out of the house, and she's staying with your mom now." It's tense. I didn't reply. Because knowing they were unraveling without me didn't bring me joy, it just brought clarity. I was never the problem. I was the glue. The peacekeeper. The anchor. And once I pulled away, they drifted into the storm they created. But I wasn't interested in watching them drown. I was building something else entirely. A new job offer came through in late March. It was at a women's health clinic in a neighboring town. Better pay. Less politics. More purpose. During the interview, the director, a warm woman named Camille, asked why I left my last job. I looked her in the eye and said, "Because I needed to put myself first for once." She smiled and shook my hand. I started 2 weeks later. My coworkers were kind. Sharp. The patients were grateful. And slowly, I realized something powerful: what they did to me hadn't broken me. It had unburied me. Underneath the years of caretaking, compromise, and overlooked betrayal, I was still there. Stronger. Smarter. Sharper. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper, typed. Short. "Cass, I don't know who I am without you. I miss the life we had. I wish I'd never ruined it. I hope someday you'll forgive me, even if you never speak to me again." Michael. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was tempted to respond. But because the man who once made me question my worth was now trying to borrow it again. I folded the letter. Slid it into the shredder. watched it vanish. Forgiveness? Maybe one day. But not now. And certainly not for him. Because forgiveness isn't owed. It's earned. It happened at the farmer's market, of all places. A cool Saturday morning, the kind where sunlight filters softly through the trees and the scent of fresh bread carries on the breeze. I was dressed in linen, hair loosely braided, holding a tote bag of apples and herbs. Peaceful. Present. Alive in ways I hadn't been in years. That's when I saw them, together. Eliza and Michael. He looked older, hunched slightly, his usual crisp shirts wrinkled at the collar. She wore oversized sunglasses and walked a half step behind him like a woman trying to disappear into his shadow. But it was too late. I had already seen them. And they had already seen me. I could feel it in the air, their tension, the way both their bodies froze when they caught sight of me walking toward the flower stall, laughing with a vendor over sunflowers. I didn't flinch. I didn't change course. I just continued on, humming softly, holding my bag, radiating the kind of quiet calm that terrifies people who once tried to destroy you. Michael had the audacity to smile. Just slightly. A twitch of his mouth. Eliza looked down. Her shoulders curled inward like she was bracing for a slap that never came. I turned, met his eyes for just a breath. No anger. No pain. Just peace. And that shook them more than fury ever could. As I picked a bouquet of wildflowers, the vendor, a kind, older man I'd grown fond of, said, "Someone's watching you like they just saw a ghost." I smiled. They did. Old flame? No, I said, tying twine around the stems. Old fire. Burned out long ago. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Their silence in my wake was louder than anything they could have said. Later that evening, I sat by the window in my apartment, trimming the ends of the flowers before placing them in water. There's something sacred about fresh beginnings, the way even cut things still bloom if you give them space, light, and a little patience. That night, I slept without dreams. No haunting. No what-ifs. Just the steady heartbeat of my own quiet reclamation. They had tried to tear me down and bury me beneath the wreckage of what they'd done. But I hadn't crumbled. I had risen, stone by stone, into a version of myself they could no longer touch. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address. No seal. Just my name in shaky handwriting across the front, Cassandra. For a moment, I thought it might be from Michael again. But the script was different. Softer. Familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. I opened it slowly, sitting at the small writing desk in my bedroom, sunlight pooling over my lap like a silent witness. The paper inside was lavender-colored. Cheap. The kind of stationery Eliza used to steal from my drawer when we were teenagers and write pretend love notes to boys she never had the courage to speak to. Cass, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because you deserve to hear me say I'm sorry, not from a stage, not filtered through excuses or carefully chosen words. Just the truth. Raw. Ugly. Mine. I loved him. I did. I think part of me always envied what you had. But love born in shadows can't survive the light. And the more I had of him, the more I realized I never had anything at all. You were always the one with the quiet power. The loyalty. The heart. And there was a smudge there. Like she'd pressed too hard. Or paused to cry. I blamed you because it was easier than facing myself. I painted you as distant, cold, absent. But the truth is, you were never absent. You were just busy holding up a house I was tearing down. And I'm sorry. I live with it every day. He doesn't speak much. We're not really together, not in any real way. Just two ghosts walking through a house that echoes with everything we broke. I hope, truly, that you're okay. That you're free. Eliza, I stared at the letter for a long time. Not because I was moved. but because it was the first time she had told the truth in years. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel rage. I felt release. Like I'd been holding the final breath of a long, painful swim and could finally exhale. That evening, I took the letter outside. I sat on the porch of my apartment under the fading light and reread it, letting her words wash over me, not to reopen wounds, but to stitch them closed. Then I struck a match, touched it to the corner of the page, and watched the flame curl it into ash. Let her keep her guilt. Let her carry the memory. I didn't need to respond. Her apology wasn't for me. It was for her. And I had nothing left to give her, not even anger. I was already beyond the wreckage, already blooming in the calm that came after everything fell apart. I had no need for her words, her regret, or her ashes. I had me. It started with a book. I was sitting in the corner of a cozy little cafe near the clinic where I now worked, reading something soft and poetic, something about resilience and women who survive. The chair across from me was empty. I'd stopped expecting company in places like this. Silence had become my most faithful companion. That's when I heard the voice. "Excuse me, is that The Wild Iris by Louise Gluck?" I looked up. He was in his 50s, maybe early 60s. Salt and pepper hair, kind blue eyes, clean stubble that hinted at someone who took care of himself without obsessing. He wore a brown jacket that looked well-worn but loved, and in his hand was a reusable coffee mug. He didn't look like a man trying to impress. He looked like a man who read poetry. "It is," I said. "I haven't seen someone reading that in years," he smiled, gesturing to the chair. "Mind if I nodded, and he sat down across from me. No flirtation. Just warmth. "I'm Jonah," he said. "I used to teach literature at the university." "Cassandra," I replied. "I used to believe in happy endings." He raised his brow gently. "Used to?" I gave a small smile. "Let's just say I've seen enough plot twists to be cautious." He chuckled. "Fair. But you're here. Reading poetry. That's a kind of hope, you know." We talked for 45 minutes. About books. About the ridiculous cost of coffee. About why he left the university after 30 years to take care of his aging mother. There was something comforting about him. Not electric. Not overwhelming. Just safe. And I realized, as we laughed about a badly spelled menu sign near the counter, that I hadn't laughed, really laughed, in months. When he stood to leave, he said, "If you ever feel like talking about more poems, or life, I'm here most Fridays." He didn't ask for my number. Didn't push. Just left the door cracked open. And for the first time in years, I found myself wanting to step through. That night, I thought of Michael. Of Eliza. Of how love used to feel like a tightrope strung over knives. Of how I used to grip so hard, trying not to fall, that I cut myself just to stay upright. But this? Jonah? That conversation? It wasn't a tightrope. It was ground. Solid. Uncomplicated. And I didn't want to run from it. I slept with the window open that night. The air was cool. The sheets were soft. And I dreamt, not of betrayal, but of a quiet afternoon with someone who looked at me without expecting anything but honesty. Maybe love wasn't dead. Maybe it was just buried under the ruins of who I used to be. And maybe, just maybe, something new was beginning. It's strange how healing can sneak up on you. One moment you're going through the motions, folding laundry, answering emails, walking past couples at the park like they don't exist, and the next, you're laughing over coffee with a man who doesn't ask for more than your presence. That man, for me, was Jonah. I started going to the cafe on Fridays. Not because I expected him, but because I hoped. And hope, that was new. It sat lightly on my shoulders, not like the burden of expectation I used to carry in my marriage. Jonah never promised anything. But he showed up. And in a world where people vanish behind silence or betrayal, showing up is everything. We talked about everything but the past. He didn't ask about my ex. I didn't ask about his. We talked about books, recipes, his mother's fondness for cardinals, my new job at the clinic, and the wild way grief can shape you without permission. Grief is love that's been cut off, he said once, sipping tea. But it can grow new roots. It doesn't have to die. I stared at him for a long time after that. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was growing. Around that same time, I found myself doing small things I hadn't done in ages, painting my nails a soft mauve, buying earrings, cooking meals just for me, and plating them like I mattered. I even went back to the yoga class I'd quit years ago, back when Eliza started sleeping under my roof and everything in me felt too heavy to lift. The instructor, a sweet woman named Laura, greeted me like an old friend. "You look lighter," she said, adjusting my posture during tree pose. I smiled, breath steady. I finally let go of something heavy. After class, I walked home with the early spring wind in my hair, and for the first time, I realized that the revenge I once clung to had transformed into something purer, peace. I didn't need Eliza to suffer every day. I didn't need Michael to lose everything. They'd already lost the one person who held their chaos together, me. And I had reclaimed everything they tried to strip away, my dignity, my independence, my softness, my joy. Jonah texted me the next morning, "There's a poetry reading at the library Thursday evening. Want to come?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I said yes. Not because I needed a date. Not because I was lonely. But because I wanted to say yes. And that difference changed everything. That Thursday, I wore a navy blue wrap dress and a silver chain that once belonged to my grandmother. I looked at myself in the mirror, not to check if I looked good enough for a man, but to honor the woman I saw there. She had been through hell. She had been broken. But she had put herself back together in a shape they no longer recognized, and one she could finally love. The library was quiet in the way old places are, books breathing softly, wooden floors humming beneath your feet. I arrived early, found a seat near the front of the poetry reading, and greeted Jonah with a smile that felt completely mine. There was a gentle buzz in the room, chairs being scooted, pages flipping, programs rustling. It should have been the kind of night that wrapped you in calm. But then I heard it. Behind me. 2 rows back. A voice I hadn't heard in months, too sharp, too sweet, and soaked in familiarity like perfume gone sour. "She's here," the voice whispered. I didn't turn. But my stomach sank. "Eliza." Jonah leaned closer and murmured, "Everything all right?" I nodded once. Too fast. "Just fine." But I wasn't. Because her presence wasn't just a shadow from the past, it was an invasion of the sanctuary I had built piece by careful piece. She shouldn't have known I'd be here. She shouldn't have wanted to be here. But there she was. Breathing in the same room. Watching. I kept my eyes forward, heart racing as the poetry began. Soft voices. Strong voices. Stories about grief, about recovery, about love. I tried to lose myself in their rhythm, but I could feel her behind me, her gaze prickling the back of my neck like thorns. After the applause, during the intermission, Jonah touched my hand. "Walk with me?" I nodded. Gratefully. We stepped into the hallway, the air cooler out there, a quiet hum from the heating vents. Jonah leaned against the wall, studying me. "You don't have to say anything. But whoever she is, she doesn't get to ruin this moment." I blinked. "You saw her. I saw you, Cassandra. And how your whole body shifted when she walked in." I took a breath. "It's my sister. The one who, well, you can guess." He didn't flinch. Just nodded. "She's never confronted me in person," I continued. "Not since everything came out. But she's followed my silence like a dog chasing its shadow." "Do you want to leave?" No. My voice surprised me with its firmness. I won't run. He smiled. Then let's go back in. Sit on the other side. You don't have to make a scene to win. I looked at him, this man who understood that strength wasn't always loud. Who didn't rush to defend me, because he knew I could do it myself. We returned, quietly. Moved seats. And for the second half of the evening, I could finally breathe again. I let the poem soak into my skin. I let the warmth of being seen, truly seen, settle inside my ribs. After the reading ended, Jonah and I stepped out into the evening air. It smelled like wood smoke and the coming rain. She was waiting by the door. Eliza, I said before she could speak. Don't. Her eyes welled up, her voice tight. I just wanted to say I saw your article. I saw you're doing better. And I held up my hand. No more apologies. No more public performances. I don't need your guilt to be whole. I don't need your closure. I made my own. She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. You really have changed. I stepped closer, looked her dead in the eyes, and said softly, I didn't change, Eliza. I just stopped letting you narrate my life. And with that, I turned. Jonah opened the car door for me. I climbed in. And as we drove away, the night closed behind us like the final page of a chapter one was never going to reread again. It was the little things at first. The way Jonah listened without interrupting. The way he never once made me feel like I had to perform grief, or gratitude, or strength. The way he reached for my hand not like a man staking a claim, but like someone checking to make sure I was still there, still real. And it was in that simple kindness I started to feel joy again. Not relief. Not survival. Joy. It came quietly, without drama or fireworks. A cup of coffee placed beside me while I worked on a Sunday. A shared laugh over a crooked bookstore shelf. Him standing beside me at the farmer's market, holding sunflowers because he remembered I liked them. No apologies. No comparisons. Just peace. And on a soft spring afternoon, it came, without warning, like most beautiful things do. We were sitting on a park bench, watching ducks weave through the lake's surface. Children laughed in the background, kites danced overhead, and I was halfway through telling a story about a patient's adorable therapy dog when I caught Jonah watching me, not with hunger, or need, or possession, but affection. And it hit me, this man didn't just like me. He saw me. The bruised, burned, rebuilt woman I had become. The silence stretched, warm and open. What? I asked, smiling at him, suddenly self-conscious. Jonah shook his head gently. You just laugh differently now. Differently? It sounds like it belongs to you again. I blinked. For a second, the world blurred around the edges. Not from pain. From something softer. I hadn't realized how long I'd been laughing like I owed it to someone else, my ex-husband, my family, even my sister. But he was right. This joy was mine now. I leaned into him, my shoulder resting lightly against his. I was afraid, I whispered. That I'd never trust someone again. That I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me. You still don't have to, he said. Not if you're not ready. I'll never ask you to shrink for my comfort. God. That right there? That was the love I never knew I needed. Not grand, sweeping gestures. Just room to exist without explanation. That evening, he walked me to my door and didn't ask to come in. He kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "You are extraordinary, Cassandra." I stood there for a long time after he left. Just breathing. Smiling. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for betrayal. I wasn't afraid of being too much or not enough. I was happy. Not because someone made me happy. But because I'd fought like hell to choose it. And I was finally ready to claim it, without guilt, without shame, without apology. It came in the form of a knock. Not a letter. Not a message. Not a call. A knock on my door. Firm. Hesitant. Rehearsed. I opened it, and there he stood, Michael. He looked smaller. Not just thinner, but shrunk. His hair had gone grayer, his eyes dimmer. The arrogance he once carried in his posture had vanished, replaced by something more familiar than I cared to admit. Desperation. Cass, he said. Please. I didn't speak. I just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, heart steady. He took a breath. I know I'm the last person you want to see. I'm not here to grovel. Or maybe I am. I don't know. I've lost track of what I've said and what I haven't. I waited. Let him fill the silence with his unraveling. I saw the article, he said. I saw your photos at the clinic, your interviews, your life. You look happy. And God, I don't even know how to say this. I thought I would be fine without you. I thought Eliza and he choked a little, like the name tasted bitter now. We destroyed something good. You were the good. I never appreciated it. And now? I said quietly. He looked up. Now I wake up every morning in an empty house. She's gone. Took whatever she could. And I'm left with echoes. Memories of a woman who held everything together while we blamed her for falling apart. I didn't flinch. You didn't just blame me, Michael. You let her publicly shame me. And you stood there. Silent. I know, he whispered. I was a coward. You still are. He looked like he'd been slapped, but he didn't deny it. I came here because I wanted to say it to your face. I was wrong. I was selfish. I lost everything worth having, and I deserve it. I nodded once. You do. He stepped back slightly. Is there any part of you that can forgive me? I paused. And then I told him the truth. I don't hate you anymore, Michael. I don't love you either. I don't spend my nights crying or wishing things were different. I've moved on, not because you deserve my peace, but because I do. He swallowed, silent. I built something out of the ruins you and Eliza left me in. Not for revenge. For me. I smile now without wondering what secret it's covering. I sleep without wondering who you're texting. I laugh, deep, belly laughs. With someone who shows up without needing to be begged. His eyes darkened. The new guy. You don't get to ask about him. He nodded slowly. Right. Of course. And then he looked at me for a long time, really looked. I could see it in his face, the regret, the weight, the realization that I was no longer someone he could reach. He stepped back again, further this time. I'm happy for you, Cassandra. I mean that. I held the door. Goodbye, Michael. He nodded once, then turned and walked away. I closed the door gently. And this time, there was no ache in my chest. No sadness. No trembling hands. Just the final, solid click of a chapter closing. He had come to reclaim something he thought still belonged to him. But the woman he betrayed? She was no longer standing where he left her. She was already gone. Spring turned to summer like the world had been waiting for me to thaw. The mornings came earlier now, sunlight dripping through my curtains like soft promises, and the quiet no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like a homecoming. Like me. And in the stillness of those warm days, something shifted inside me. I started saying yes more. Yes to long walks. Yes to friends I'd neglected. Yes to dinners, to dancing, to books I once put down halfway because I was too consumed by survival to finish them. I said yes to life, the parts of it I'd pressed pause on while living inside someone else's story. Jonah was still there, steady as the tide. Never asking for too much. Never trying to own a single part of me. He just was. And that consistency became a foundation I hadn't realized I craved. We weren't labeling anything. We didn't need to. He understood me in a way that required no explanation. One afternoon, as we sat on a rooftop patio watching the sunset bleed into the ocean, Jonah turned to me with that quiet warmth in his eyes. You ever think about what you would have done differently? It was a simple question. But my answer surprised us both. No, I said softly. Because every terrible thing that happened brought me back to myself. He smiled. You're remarkable, you know that? No, I said, grinning. But I'm finally starting to believe it. A week later, something unexpected happened. I was invited to speak. Naomi, the friend who wrote the article about my story, had pitched the idea to a local women's group, a conversation about betrayal, resilience, and rebirth. My first instinct was no. I didn't want to be the face of heartbreak. I didn't want to be their cautionary tale. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized my story wasn't just about what they did to me. It was about what I did next. And that was worth telling. So I stood on a small stage in a room full of women who carried their own quiet wars and told the truth. Not for pity. Not for applause. But for connection. For freedom. I lost everything I thought made me who I was, I said. My marriage. My family. My pride. And then I discovered that what I had left was me. And I was stronger than anything they broke. When I finished, the applause wasn't thunderous, it was soft, honest. A few women wiped tears. One woman stood and said, I left my husband last month. I thought I was alone. Thank you. Afterward, Jonah waited outside with a sunflower in one hand and 2 iced teas in the other. You were brilliant, he said. I was honest, I corrected. Same thing, he smiled. We sat in the grass outside the building, sipping tea as the sun set. And I realized, in that small, quiet moment, without grand gestures or dramatic endings, I had arrived at something deeper than revenge. I had arrived at peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting. But the kind that comes from reclaiming your life, and choosing every part of it with intention. It arrived folded in half, sealed with cheap gold foil like an afterthought, an invitation to my niece's baby shower. Eliza's daughter. I stared at it on my kitchen table for a long time, as if the paper might start whispering apologies or excuses. But all it did was sit there, pretending like time could soften betrayal. Inside was a handwritten note, unmistakably from my mother, please come, Cass. It's time. Let's all be in the same room again. It wasn't about reconciliation. It was about appearances. Still, I stared at the RSVP card for 3 days before finally checking yes. Not out of obligation, but out of intention. I didn't want to blend in. I wanted them to see me. To see the woman they tried to shrink, standing tall in the very space they once tried to push her out of. I arrived 20 minutes late on purpose. All heads turned when I walked in. I wore a fitted navy jumpsuit, hair swept up in a twist, no apologies on my face. Jonah offered to come, but I told him no. This was my moment. Mine alone. Eliza was standing near the dessert table, cradling a mocktail and laughing with someone she used to gossip about. When she saw me, her face shifted like she'd seen a ghost, and in a way, she had. She excused herself and walked over. Cass, she said. You came. I did. She swallowed, searching for the right tone. I wasn't sure if you'd want to be here. I didn't. But I wanted you to see that I could be. Her eyes lowered. It's been a hard year. I'm sure it has, I said gently. Truth usually makes people uncomfortable. She glanced around, probably hoping someone would save her from this conversation. But no one came. Because for the first time I was the woman with presence. Not noise. Not drama. Gravity. I don't want it to be tense, she said, her voice small. Not with the baby coming. I want peace. I leaned in slightly. Peace is earned, Eliza. Not inherited. Not forced. If you want it, you'll have to live in a way that honors it. Then I walked away. I greeted my niece warmly. Gave her a thoughtful gift. I talked to cousins. Smiled at old aunts. When my mother approached me with tired eyes and tried to hug me, I allowed it, but didn't sink into it. That bond was cracked, maybe beyond repair. But I could be civil without surrender. Before I left, someone asked me to pose for a group photo. I stood at the end of the line, not in the center like I once might have been. But not hidden either. And when the camera clicked, I smiled not for them, but for me. Because I wasn't here to prove anything anymore. I was simply here. Whole. Untouched by their whispers. Unbothered by their guilt. Free. It wasn't the pain that lingered. Not anymore. It was the habit. The way I still sometimes double-checked my phone, expecting a cruel message. The way I occasionally caught myself shrinking in crowds, as if I should make myself small enough to avoid confrontation. The way I hesitated before laughing too loudly, or reaching for someone's hand, or letting someone get too close. Because for years, I had been trained, quietly, slowly, to feel like too much. Too emotional. Too serious. Too needy. Too quiet. Too sharp. Michael did that. Eliza, too. They didn't have to say it outright. It was in the way they responded. Or didn't. In the way they made their betrayals my fault. But now, I was standing at the edge of something new. And if I wanted to truly live in that future, I had to drop the last stone I'd been carrying. One night, Jonah and I took a long walk by the lake. The sky was violet, the moon low and glowing like a secret. We didn't say much. Sometimes silence is love, too. He paused near the water, turned to me, and said, "Do you still think about them?" I could have lied. But I didn't. Sometimes, I said. But not because I miss them. It's more like checking a scar. Making sure it's still closed. He nodded. That's fair. Then he asked, so gently it almost blew away with the wind, "Do you still feel like you have to protect yourself from me?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I felt it, how different this love was. It didn't chase. It didn't trap. It didn't demand or perform. It just waited. Open. Soft. Steady. I took his hand. "No," I said. "I don't." And I meant it. I had spent so long guarding myself from harm that I almost forgot how to receive something safe. But Jonah wasn't asking me to fall. He was just offering me the space to stand beside him. Later that night, I sat alone on my balcony with a cup of tea and a pen in hand. No computer. No distractions. Just a notebook, and one final thing I needed to write. To the woman I was, you didn't deserve what happened. You didn't cause it. You didn't invite it. And you were never too much. You were just surrounded by people too small to hold you. But you held yourself. And you rose. And now, it's time to let go. Not of the lesson. But of the ache. I tore the page out, folded it, and burned it in a small ceramic bowl. Watched the flame eat the ink. Watched the past curl into smoke. And just like that, the last shadow was gone. Not because it was erased. But because I had outgrown it. Before we begin, let me say this one last time, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who looked you in the eye and told you they loved you while twisting the knife deeper, you are not alone. Please subscribe my channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you from, and what's the one thing you learned about yourself after heartbreak? Because this is what I learned. 312 days after I left my marriage, I stood barefoot on the shore of a quiet beach in Nova Scotia, seagulls above me, waves rolling in like steady breath. Jonah stood a few yards back, letting me have the moment. The final moment. Because this wasn't just a trip. This was a letting go. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small glass bottle, sealed tight with wax. Inside, 2 wedding bands. One silver. One gold. Both tainted by silence and lies. I had carried them too long, not because I wanted them, but because part of me needed proof that it had happened. That I hadn't imagined the love, or the betrayal. But now? Now I had something better than proof. Peace. I kissed the bottle once and whispered, "You don't own me anymore." Then I hurled it into the sea. It disappeared into the gray-blue distance, swallowed whole. And with it, the last tether to a life that no longer held any part of me. Later that evening, Jonah and I sat at a small cafe by the docks. The sun was setting behind us, casting everything in golden hush. He reached across the table and took my hand, rubbing his thumb over the inside of my wrist like he was grounding me to the earth. "You're glowing," he said. "I'm free," I whispered. Because I was. Free from the weight of their shame. Free from being the woman they blamed. Free from shrinking myself to fit their comfort. I no longer needed apologies. I no longer needed revenge. I no longer needed to explain. I had told my story. I had rebuilt my life. I had fallen in love again, not with a man, but with myself. Jonah was the bonus. But I was the reward. So if you're still in the middle of the fire, if you're still sitting in the wreckage wondering how they could do it, wondering how you'll ever feel whole again, listen to me. You are not what they did to you. You are what you choose next. You can scream. Or you can go silent. You can fight. Or you can walk. But whatever you do, do it for you. Because I stayed quiet for too long. I stayed for love. I stayed for family. I stayed for peace. But the day I left? That was the day I came home to myself. And I never looked back. Where are you from, and what's the boldest thing you ever did after someone broke your heart? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Your voice matters. And your story? It's only just beginning.